We often hear mindset is everything, but how do we become insightful on our mindset? Do I have a good one or do I have a destructible one? We talk mindset, expectations, relationship with our bodies, tools to discover what encompasses our identity, victimhood, intuition, and much more with the life coach and founder of Miss Empowered, a movement dedicated to inspiring people to find their best version. You may know her as a former Miss Universe Puerto Rico. Let's meet Danna Hernández.
A lot of us saw a successful Dana go through the Miss Universe Puerto Rico pageant. You won the Miss Universe Puerto Rico crown. You went to compete. You came back. Now, whenever you came back to the island, a lot of changes in the Miss Universe Puerto Rico organization and administration were happening.
Yeah,
Changes can bring a lot of uncertainty, and that can be
yeah,
for the good or for the bad. I personally always saw you very poised, very composed, very graceful. I always saw a graceful Dana. Did you feel successful and graceful the whole time?
yes. There was a lot of turmoil after Miss Universe happening with the whole change with the administration, a lot of uncertainty. I wasn't exactly feeling my best when I came back from Miss Universe because I felt like my dreams were shattered. Like I didn't see what I expected. Like the experience wasn't exactly what I had pictured in my mind, and that taught me a
Okay.
lot about what expectation is and what it can do when you're like diving into an experience like that. Was I poised and graceful? I think I've always kept in mind how my actions and what I say can have an impact in my future and the people around me. So I remember during that time, there was a lot that I wanted to say. Like, I still wanted to be part of all the activities. I wanted to spend time with the girls, and that was not exactly happening. I know there were a lot of like, um, stuff going on inside the organization that I
Right.
wasn't aware about. Like I literally found out that the organization was like part of a new administration, just like everyone else. I didn't know anything before it happened, and it took me by surprise. I was also under contract with the past administration, and then it was like a whole thing. And in the moment, I felt a little bit alienated from the whole situation. But then, air life take its course. Everything happens for a reason. I remember that at some point I was given the opportunity to do a whole interview, like talking about all my experience, but I felt like that had a connotation that they wanted to give it, that it wasn't the image that I wanted to present. So I chose to stay, like, to watch from far and just be part of the, I think it was a press conference, and just when I gave away my title.
You mentioned the word expectations, and I want to take it a little bit back. Whenever you went to the Miss Universe international competition, what were your expectations and how were they not met?
First and foremost, I started pageantry when I was 5 years old, and this
Mhm.
was a long life dream of mine. Like everyone who knows me from childhood knows that I always saw, like, I saw it coming. Like I was always like doing these little steps, competing in different pageants, just like building my repertoire because I wanted to do Miss Universe. And when I went over there, I just have to say it. I thought it was going to be more organized. I thought it was going to be
Okay.
more like Miss Universe. Yeah, Miss Universe, like the top tier of like pageantry. And,
Mm-hmm.
once you do Miss Universe, what else is there to do? Of course, there's a lot of pageants and a lot of options, but Miss Universe for a long time has been like number one. And it just, maybe it was that year in specific. Obviously, I can only talk from my experience. It
Of
wasn't
course.
as organized as I thought it would be. And there was just things going on
So
that I
much.
wasn't aware of, that might have not affected my
Yes.
development in the competition. And those are things that you, in the moment, I feel like that hurt me a lot, and I went into a little cocoon, a little depressive episode. But now looking back at it, I understand like why things had to be the way they were, and everything plays out beautifully.
Now, you mentioned expectations and how to handle them. How did
Mm-hmm.
Dana use to manage expectations before that experience in Miss Universe? And how does she manage them now Can you compare them?
So I had this expectation that I had just like, I had put so much into it. And after that, like all these opportunities were going to happen. Everything was going to like, all the doors were going to open for me. And that was the year that Puerto Rico experienced the Hurricane Maria.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, my preparation, so I won Miss Puerto Rico May 5th, if I'm not mistaken. And the hurricane happened in September. So those months prior to Miss Universe, my preparation really suffered a bit, you know, like we did the most that we could, you know, but it still wasn't the same because there was no signal. Obviously, the priority in Puerto Rico was to take care of what was happening in the island.
Mm-hmm.
And the pageant just took like a back seat, and I felt like I didn't have the opportunities that usually beauty queens get, you know, in the media and publicity and all that stuff. And I feel like I just, in the moment, I thought to myself, this is all part of my story, you know, like everything happens for a reason. I'm not going to sweat it because I can't control it. You know, this happened. And so and so. So I kind of like, during that whole time, I feel like I remained open to like whatever was going to happen, and that everything was part of the story. But then after Miss Universe, that felt like a breakup for sure. Like it felt like a heartbreak.
Really?
I remember after the competition, 100%. And that was like 100%, like, because that had been my priority for such a long time, and then it not turning out the way that I expected to, it took a toll on me. I remember I didn't want to come back to Puerto Rico right away because it felt like a failure. Like so much stuff was going on through my mind, and I needed some days to figure myself out. How do I manage expectations now? I feel that now, as a 26-year-old, I understand that everything happens for a reason. And even if you don't understand it now, in the long term, you'll understand the purpose of it. You know, like maybe if I had won Miss Universe, Miss Empowered wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the breakthroughs that I've had since then. I've lived in LA, I've lived in Miami now. I've done so much, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if I had done Miss Universe, you know? So I treasure the experiences that I've had till now, and I feel like I welcome life with open arms.
You mentioned that it was hard. It was almost like a breakup. And again, I thank you for being vulnerable about that, because in this podcast, we've talked before about grief. And it's hard once you're done with the beauty pageant. It's like, what does my life look like right now? Like, who
100%.
am I? What do I do? And that can happen in different stages of life. Like we can talk about relationships, we can talk about jobs, we can talk about opportunities, maybe contracts ended, you name it, it's grief at the end of the day. So this usually can lead to a stagnant, kind of like stuck feeling. So how to mentally get over this state of mind based on your experience? And I would like you to be specific.
So for me, after Miss Universe, I was in college. I was doing a bachelor's in communications, and I started in La UPR. Then I transferred myself to Sagrado because they had online options, and I wasn't I was too busy with the preparation. I couldn't be going physically to college. And then when I moved to LA, I transferred my credits to UCLA, and that's where I finished my bachelor's. I knew that I was most likely not gonna work at a 9 to 5 office job because that just was not my calling. But I did it anyways because I only had like a semester or two left. So I finished my bachelor's, I did the internship, and then I started working at the agency, a PR agency in LA, where I had done my internship. That was a great experience. I loved the people that I was working with. My boss was great, the best boss ever. And that is exactly how I knew that it wasn't the people that I was around, like that wasn't the problem. The office was like in the middle of West Hollywood, you know, like that wasn't the problem. We were working with like super exciting projects, doing red carpets and so much stuff. Like I knew that wasn't the problem. So I know it was me. And I remember having a conversation with my boss and being like, you know, like this isn't really like filling my cup, this and that. And he was like, well, fell quickly. And, you know, like short after I left that job and I started experimenting with posting more on social media, but not just like cute pictures and stuff that had to do with pageantry or my image. Just like I've always read a lot of self-help books. I've always like been very into that kind of stuff. So I started sharing that, and the feedback started to be really good. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I can, like start focusing more on this. Also, in the
Right.
agency that I was working in, I was reaching out to a lot of influencers for the agency. So I saw what was possible, and I was like, I feel like I can do this.
Right.
And that's like how I saw, yeah, doors open for me in that sense. And short after that, the pandemic started to happen, and I've always journaled. I've always like I remember Pinterest, the Tumblr days, and all that stuff. Like I've always loved like looking at cute pictures and all that stuff. So I would journal, and then I started thinking, well, maybe I can make something of this, because I didn't want to mix my personal page with this new thing that I was
Mm.
doing. So that is how Miss Empowered is born. Like it just started as me sharing cute pictures with positive messages or insights and stuff that I was learning about. Um, and people started asking me like for advice and all that stuff, but I've always been really careful when I'm giving advice, because I don't
Mm.
want to impose my opinion on people. Like I always want people to find like their own kind of thing, like you tell me what you want to do, and I'll kind of like I'll work around that. I'll help you, like find it in yourself, unless you ask me in my experience and what I would do. So I saw that happen, and then I was like, the pandemic was happening, and I was like, well, I'm gonna certify myself as a life coach. And I got certified as a life coach, and that was how I sort of like found my path, because I've always liked beauty pageants, I've always liked fashion and modeling
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff, but didn't quite fill my cup. So this about reading of self-help and all these things that I would do like behind the scenes, but like was like something that I feel like kept me in check and grounded. But I am a little bit of everything. Like I love fashion, I love self-help, like so it was kind of me searching for that balance, very much as the Libra I am.
Basically, you would say that just engaging and just discovering yourself, allowing yourself to discover on all those things that you liked really help you get over that grief that once you felt.
Yeah, I think after Miss Universe, I was doing the whole office thing, and I knew that, that was what I was supposed to do, but it wasn't quite making me feel like fulfilled. Like after being such a long time in, the beauty industry and doing all
Mm-hmm.
these things, like the office job was like not doing it for me, and I felt like I had more to do. I had more for I wanted to experiment more with myself, and I was kind of afraid, because like the office job is like a secure job.
Secure.
You get a paycheck every two. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Secure. You get a paycheck every 2 weeks. Um, so it's like, well, this is kind of a leap, but like, if not now,
Which
when?
and I
So
love that you're telling me this because a part of me resonates with it. And I'm sure
yeah,
there's a lot of people out there, especially in the beauty pageant industry, that once they're done, they're like, what do I do? Go to 9 to 5? That sucks. So, how did you
yeah.
take that leap of faith? Like, how was that process mentally speaking of you saying, okay, Danna, we are doing this. These are the next steps. Did you have a plan? You were like, you know what, universe, here we go, honey? Or what was it? What was your
Absolutely
take?
no plan. No, absolutely no plan. It was more of like me trying to find myself outside of pageantry, like I feel like there's two types of women in pageantry, like there's women that after they're done with the pageant era
Mhm.
or, stage in their
Their
lives,
face.
they move on to something. Yeah, they move into something else, they do something else with their lives, or, whatever that is. And then there's pageant girls that kind of like stay in that loophole, like I feel like they never break out of that stage. And I knew that I didn't want to be attached to what pageantry was for me. I wanted to create like an identity and find myself outside of pageantry. So I did a lot of inner work, asked myself a lot of questions, and I understood that there was a lot of like inner child healing, getting to know myself, and all that sort of stuff that needed to happen. So that's how I started, like bettering myself and finding my purpose. And that's how I decided to put it out in Miss Empowered, because I was like, if it's doing good for me, it might do good for someone else.
Totally. Do you recall some of those questions that you ask yourself in order to heal?
Yeah. And sometimes I still do. Like, these are questions that I've asked myself at different points of my life. I'm like, why, and not from a perspective of victimhood, because I feel like victimhood keeps you in a loophole, but to understand why it happened and what I can learn from it to not repeat the same
Mm.
cycle. I've asked myself what values do I want to bring to the table. Like I've never, and my parents never let me rely on just that. Like my parents were like, yeah, being pretty is not enough. Like having a pretty face is just not going to cut it for you. So
Mm.
I've always felt like I have this responsibility then to be more than that. And I don't want it to sound like weird, like, oh, like a pretty, no,
You're
I
good.
just like, what else, like his beauty is going to fade at some point. It's going to change.
With the knowledge that you have now, what would you say to the version of Danna that competed in Miss Universe Puerto Rico?
Wow. Honestly, looking back, I feel like I had it all under control. Like I really did everything that I could. Like I look back at what my schedule was when I was doing Miss Puerto
Mm-hmm.
Rico and how I managed myself. And for a 21-year-old, I feel like I really had it all in check. Like I knew where I was going, why I was doing it. Even when I was doing Miss Puerto Rico, I remember like I centered my preparation a lot, like from the inside out. I didn't compare myself to any of the candidates. I didn't pay attention
Mm.
to the forums. Like I knew I was gonna win, and I had no plan B. I had no plan B. I was like, if this doesn't go right, well, I'll figure it out. But I had no plan B. Like I visualized everything. Like I obviously like like every year is the same thing. The reigning Miss Puerto Rico, she's gonna crown you, and then usually Jaime was the host, so he's gonna announce who's winning. So I would literally meditate and replay Jaime's voice and Brenda,
Wow.
which was like the other queen, and I would visualize that until it would bring me to tears. Like I would
Wow.
literally tap into the emotion again and again and again. And I remember standing there in the stage before I won, and I started crying even before it happened because I knew it was gonna happen. I could feel it, and
Wow.
I felt so aligned. I felt so aligned when I was competing for Miss Puerto Rico, and I felt like everything happened perfectly. I did everything that I had to do, and of course, like there's a percentage of preparation that is what you put into it,
Mm-hmm.
how you show up, your attitude, whatever, and then there's a chance, like a percentage that is just chance, like what the universe has in store for you, like if it's meant to happen or not. And I feel like the cards were for me when I did Miss Puerto Rico.
How would you tell that another person, another contestant, how to tap into that energy, how to tap into that state that you were able to acquire or to feel prior to the competition? Like you already felt like a winner. You already said, this is my title and nobody's taking it away from me.
You have to believe it. Like you can't look outside for approval. You can't be outsourcing that because you're never gonna find it because there's so many people and so many opinions that you're just gonna get lost in it. I remember when I started competing, I was never placed as one of the favorite contestants or
No?
anything. And in the beginning, no. Like, I mean, people knew who I was because I always did pageantry and
Right.
I modeled. Like, I was part of all the agencies in Puerto Rico. So everyone knew of me, but I wasn't placed as like top. Like, I don't think many, like, there was people that believed in me from the beginning, but I wouldn't say that I was placed as the winner since the beginning. And I remember that, so I would see some of the comments and I would think to myself, like, I don't remember it ever bringing me down. I remember it was more of like, oh, they don't know me. They've never seen me in person. They don't know how like the energy. There's social media wasn't then what it is now. So like for the most part, it was just pictures back then, like, and you can't see a person's
You can't feel a
perspective,
person.
personality,
Exactly.
aura, energy. You can't feel that through a picture. So I was like, like wait till they see me in the mall tours, and that was kind of like the inner chit chat that I was giving myself. Like if something brought me down or something happened, like I feel like I jumped back into it really quick. So that's what I would say to the candidates. Like, don't outsource that approval because you're never gonna find it. Like, if you're gonna do something, do it 100%, so that whatever happens after that, because like there's certain things that you can control,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to tell yourself that you gave it your best.
I love that. You mentioned earlier comparison, and you share in your blog, quote, comparison is the thief of joy. This can happen in pageants.
Yeah,
This can happen in work. This can happen in school, family, social media, you name it. So,
100%.
and I remember in the blog, you shared that in certain instances of your life, you used to compare yourself. How did you
Yeah.
notice when you started comparing yourself and how you stopped it?
I remember this happened to me earlier, like in the stages of social media when I was still in high school. Um, I remember me being in high school and following all these models on Instagram and being like,
Mm,
oh, but like why do they have like a thigh gap? I remember that was the thing back then. Or like, why is there, like their face like this or their nose like this? Why might like, like you start to see like what is out there in the world. And back then there wasn't much of that conversation of like Photoshop and all that stuff. Like
mm,
we weren't that knowledgeable back then. And I remember comparing myself and going on these crazy diets and like trying to attain something that was like just not meant for me. And I think that's part of like growing up, like you start to appreciate your own beauty, instead of being
mm-hmm.
like, why me? Like, why am I not like that? You start to appreciate that everyone's just different and beautiful in their own way. And the more you focus on them, the less you're gonna have left for you. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
yeah, that was a big lesson that I learned early on.
Totally. Now, you mentioned we were talking about comparison and you mentioned body. So let's talk body. This is a constant
Mm-hmm.
topic in beauty pageants. And
Mm-hmm.
the dialogue has changed over the years. I want to think, right?
Mm-hmm.
In December 2021, you shared, quote, I spent many years hurting myself and punishing my body for just being. I wanted to be different because I was always told that my body type was not suitable for the aspirations that I had. Oh, that gives me chills. Let's talk about the relationship that you have with your body and how it has evolved and what was the breaking point for you.
Oh my God, it's changed so much. So I think that for Miss Universe, I went on this crazy diet to lose. Like when I won, I don't remember the exact weight that I was in, but I remember that I was whatever. Let's say that I really don't remember, but I was in a certain way when I won Miss Puerto Rico, and then I was told that I needed to lose more. So I felt like I was already skinny when I won Miss Puerto Rico, and after that I lost like 20 pounds. I
Oh,
lost like
wow.
20 pounds, and that took me on a spiral because, yeah, I reached the number that I thought that I had to that I had to be in
Mm-hmm.
order to be successful, or the number that I had always read. But I didn't feel like it didn't make me feel more beautiful than I felt before. It didn't make me feel more valuable. So I thought to myself, like, why did I do all this for? And then after Miss Universe, I remember when I moved to LA that I was like, I had a different routine. I was working an 8-hour job every day. I was in traffic. I didn't have that much time to work out like
Yeah.
I did before, and I gained a little weight. But like when you gain weight in the first, like in the beginning, it hasn't like quite settled in your body, so you just look puffy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember like that was giving me a lot of like trouble. And I
Mm.
tell you this, but now I look at those pictures and I was like, you were really like you thought you were. So I remember that the way that my body looked and how it felt impacted a lot of like my mood and how my day would be. Like if I
Really?
felt that I was bloated or not how I thought I had to look, that was a bad day for me. Like I had to do crazy dieting, I had to work out extra, like my life I felt like revolved a lot around that. And I didn't want to feel that way anymore. So I started doing some inner work and looking at the things that were kind of like making me feel that way. Um and I was since I was like 13, I remember I went to this agency in Puerto Rico, and
Mm-hmm.
I was happy to be there. I always liked modeling, and I modeled when I was a kid, and then I kind of like took a break. I was doing volleyball, ballet, and whatever. And then they were like, "Oh yeah, you have the perfect height, whatever, but you need to lose. I think I don't know if it was 2 inches or 5, I don't remember, for my thighs. And I've always had like very strong thighs because I've always played sports.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do volleyball, I used to run. Um, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. I was like, yeah, whatever. But then when I kind of like left the appointment, it was like, well, that's what you got to do if you want to make it, if you want to actually make something happen. And that's where like dieting started for me. I was like 13, 14, around that age. I can't remember exactly how old I was. Um, and I started thinking about those moments, and I was like, well, in the self-help books, they teach you that in order for you to have an existing thought in your head, like you have to accept it. Like if I tell you, wow, your blonde hair looks horrible, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, my hair isn't blonde, so like she must be reflecting herself or something, because like it's not about me that
Mm-hmm.
she's talking. But if you say, my hair is kind of brassy and like ugly and mistreated, well, you accepted the thought. So I started looking at the things that I haven't accepted that people were saying about me and all that stuff, and that was kind of a breakthrough for me. And then little by little, I started appreciating my body for different things, and everything started changing for me. And then when I was finally ready, I was like, well, I want to share this, because like I feel like a lot of people, a lot of girls
Hmm.
spend most of their life like judging their bodies, comparing it, going on crazy diets, working out until they're exhausted, thinking that they're gonna find something that, yeah, you can attain the weight, right? But if you haven't fixed what's here, you're always gonna be like, okay, so you reached the weight, then now it's gonna be something else. Now you're gonna fixate on like how you don't like how your forearm looks, or how your eyebrows are, or now your cheeks are too small. Like the work has to be from inside out. And I tapped into that, and that's how it happened for me.
That's one of the things that you mentioned in your website, precisely. When you go to danieshka.com, it says
Yeah.
that you are advocating real, authentic stories, mindset, insight, and fashion tips to build a community of collaborative and empowered women. Mindset insight
Hmm.
caught my attention. What does mindset insight mean for you, and how do you help other women right now just get there, achieve that?
So I feel like mindset really makes or breaks what your life is. Like life
Mhm.
happens, situations happen every day. And the way that you confront those situations is going to determine a lot of the outcome. Like, what is the chit chat that you're telling yourself? Like, how are you going out into the world? Like a thought precedes an emotion. Like, if I start thinking, oh, how horrible I am, like how ugly I am, there's no way that I'm going to feel bad, like good about myself, because I'm stuck in that loophole. If I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, wow, you're great. Like, there's no one else like you in this world. You're great because of X, Y, and Z. Look what you've overcome. Look who you're becoming. Look the person that you are. Well, I'm gonna start acting like that. I'm gonna show up to a room, and that's what I'm gonna exude. That's what people are gonna
Mm,
see from me. Like, oh, this is a person that values herself. This is a person that like she really knows what she's doing. So I feel like a lot of all of that comes from like mindset, and that's always been like something really big for me, like how you choose to look at a situation. Because I feel like a lot of people can be stuck in the victimhood for such a long time, and that takes a lot from you, and that's time that you can't get back. So mindset has always been very important for me, and insight, it's like the aha moment, like breaking points in your life where you're like, you get it. Okay, so I get why this happened to me, because if this hadn't had happened to me, I wouldn't have learned this. I wouldn't have become this. I wouldn't be able to show up the way that I show up. I wouldn't be able to share my experience and inspire other women, or like for people to know that it's possible, to like there's life after whatever
right,
happened.
right.
Yeah, so that's what it means for me.
I love that. And I think at the end of the day, what we all want is just to be joyful. So,
100%.
how to identify what brings us genuine joy, how you identify what brings you genuine joy? Because I'm gonna put an example. If I go to Home Goods and I start buying stuff for my house, I have a joy in my heart that just like pours out. if I'm listening to a certain podcast and I'm just telling myself pretty things like I'm joyful, but that's just temporary. That just has
A
a
hundred
an end
percent.
date or an end time. So
Mm-hmm.
what brings joy that lasts? Or would you consider joy to be a temporary feeling?
I think feelings are definitely fleeting. Like, you can't stay in one feeling forever, like the human experience is meant to experience everything in different ways, and there's I feel like the ultimate goal is to be at peace, you know.
Mm.
Um I love what you said, because when you said that you felt joy when you were going to Home Goods, I was like, well, what happens if Home Goods doesn't exist
It's
anymore?
got
You're not
right.
able to go to Home Goods. You're never gonna feel joy anymore. Like, so, and that's kind of like outsourcing for me, finding joy in the beginning when I was trying to like discover that. I feel like I've always been like a happy person, like all around. I When something happens to me, majority of the times I'm able to like bounce back from it really quick. But I think it's always been for me like going back to what made me happy when I was a kid. So when I was a
Mm.
kid, I don't remember too much of me being a girl that would like play with dolls. Like, I did. I played with dolls with my neighbors and stuff, but I was more of
Mhm.
like using my mom's heels and doing my makeup and listening to music and performing for my family. So, like, music is a big part of my life. I am blasting music all the time, and I feel really
I
happy
love
when I'm
that.
listening to music. But even that, like, even that could sometimes be like a distraction, from whatever is going on in your head. So, I try not to think too much about it. I think being joyful is like finding happiness and like being fulfilled in little moments, like not waiting for something to happen for you to give yourself permission to be happy. So, oh, so now I have a three-figure job. Now I can be happy, because it's never going to be enough. Like, how can I be happy while I am, like searching for, I don't know, the three-figure job, or losing the 20 pounds, or building my dream job, or whatever, Like, it's
Totally.
finding how to be happy in the journey, and trying to make
Totally.
yourself like your life as good as you can. Like, if someone's being toxic, if it's not adding to your life, it's actually draining you and taking away, well,
Remove it.
they have to go.
Right.
They have to go.
Right. And
Yeah.
you have ownership over that. Now, a feeling that is not hard to identify and can easily claim territory is fear. So, my question is, when has fear stopped or paralyzed you? And how do you overpass it?
Not for a long time. I don't think that fear has ever paralyzed me, but I've definitely felt fear in different stages of my life for different reasons. I think that when I first started with Miss Empowered and sharing the messages, I felt a little bit of fear because it was something that I wasn't open about, and I feel like it was kind of like new to everyone, and I felt like I consider myself to be very spiritual, and
Okay.
I give a lot of thought to like what energy is, like the aura of a person. Like, I really focus on that. So I thought to myself, I was like, wow, this is gonna be like a little bit crazy to some people, like I feel like spirituality can be confused. Like, I don't think spirituality has to do with religion at all, and I
Mm.
think that can be a touchy subject, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people like they feel threatened, or whatever, they feel like offended. So I felt a little bit like scared in that aspect, but I
Okay.
started focusing on what was true to me and what was doing good for me. And kind of like focusing on that, like in every stage of my life, I've always have to like bring it back to myself and what feels good to me. Like, I can't be worrying of how are other people gonna see it, how are they gonna take it, because I cannot be in control. I feel it's like feel the fear and do it anyways. And there's different types of fear. I feel like there's fear of the unknown, and you don't know what's gonna happen, and you sort of like you have to risk it. And there's fear, and it's like anticipation, because like you're stepping out of your comfort zone, and that is kind of exciting. Like, when it's that type of fear, like, well, whatever, this is a growing fear. Like, I know I'm gonna be way much better after this.
How to identify when it's uncomfortableness slash fear versus it's my intuition telling me, get the heck out of here, turn around, this is not the way? How do I identify and just know how to differentiate between the two?
So for me, I would rephrase as like what's ego and what's intuition.
Mm,
So I would think to myself that intuition, it's not screaming at you. It's like it's a knowing. It's like, so if I would have to put it like a devil and an angel, the angel is like,
mm,
well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't.
mm,
It just tells you. And the ego, the devil is like, you should like do it. This is gonna be so great. This and that, this and that. You know, like if it really doesn't feel good and it gives you,
right.
sometimes I think to myself, like, how would I feel after? You know, like how am I gonna feel after this? Am I gonna feel like I conquered, like this was a step closer to where I want to be? And that's how I base my decision making.
I want to ask you something. No second chances on first impressions. This was one of your quotes on Instagram, and I loved it because I resonate so much with
Yeah.
that. Now, for you, what are musts on first impression? And this takes us back to the beauty pageant industry, because at the end of the day, yes, it's a first impression outside, but it can
Yeah.
also be a first impression energetically speaking. So, what are your musts?
I remember that before going on stage, like I would have this mantra that I would tell myself. I would be like, okay, so yo soy luz y yo controlo mi experiencia. And that was originally how I would say it. And then someone told me, you should change controlo por creo. So I would tell myself, yo soy luz y yo creo mi experiencia. And when I would feel nervous or like before going on stage or
Mm-hmm.
before an interview or like something that was giving me like a little bit of stress, I would tell myself that. And that would kind of like put me in a mentality of like, you know, like this is me. I just want like my essence to shine through. Like I want them to like feel whatever. And that was the space that I would put myself in, you know, and when you are in a good space mentally and you know the value that you bring to the table, you know that you're not outsourcing your value, you know that you prepared yourself, you know that you're not only pretty on the outside, but you really take care of your energy and how you move around people, you know, in your life. That's just going to shine through, you know, like you just know who you are.
What did you discover about yourself? And I think it goes aligned with this answer that you just gave. What did you discover about yourself through the beauty pageant that you didn't know before?
That's a good question. I feel like every pageant that I competed in taught me something about myself, and that's what I loved about competition. Like it pushes you to a point where the person that enters the competition, if you do it right, it's not the person that comes out of it. In regards to competition, like I would always learn like, okay, like this works for me. Like I remember like twirls were my thing, for example. um I was always told that I was really good at doing interviews. I was told that I needed to work more on my projection when I was doing the gown or whatever. But I also learned that you learn, like you grow so much as a person when you focus on yourself during the competition. Like there's two ways to compete. There's girls and that have like toxic people behind them, and they're always, I feel like always waiting for an opponent to have a bad day during the competition or like compare themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that really, I don't think I've ever seen those girls win.
Mm.
Just like I don't think I've ever seen them win the competition. But when you source like the competition on yourself and like sort of like look inward, you focus on what you can bring to the table, you know. And I feel like getting to know yourself is something that no one can take away from you.
Danna, what does success mean to you?
I think success is more mental than anything, because like people can feel successful in different ways, you know. Like maybe to someone success is like having their own family and having 4 kids and a house, and success to someone else might be, you know, like building this company, this multi-million company. And you know, like it doesn't mean that one is right, one is wrong, it's just different. And for me, I just think is like feeling like you can attain your goals. Like when you set out to do something and you're able to tell yourself that you did it, um, I feel like that is a very like empowering feeling because you kept your word, like, and it doesn't have to be these huge things, like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say that you want to start working out and you want to work out every day. And even if you were tired, like for example, this week I really have not been feeling working out. Like I've been going to a gym and me knowing who I usually am and how I work out. Let's say that this week I've been giving it a 45%, but I've been showing up, and in that 45%, I've been giving it what is my 100% in that day. So that makes me feel successful because it makes me feel like I'm showing up for myself, for my well-being, for my mental health, for my physical health, and I am investing in myself. So I think it's like being able to keep your word for yourself.
So what's next for Danna?
So that's a question that I ask myself a lot. I'm not gonna lie, there's been points where I've felt like a writer's block. So I've been feeling a little bit of that because like I want to step more into my creativity and like I want to create great content. And at times I felt a little bit okay, like what's next? Like outfits are cute, skincare is cute, but like what's next? You know? And I felt that, and I am in the process of like, I've changed a lot during the last year. A lot of change has been going on in my life, and I welcome it. I embrace it. So, to a certain extent, it's like I'm getting to know myself again, and that brings a lot of new things. So I'm hoping that a lot of things were misempowered. Like I've always felt very fulfilled when I'm helping others, especially women that have gone through whatever I went through. As I said before, I want to be more in touch with my creative self. So I don't know where that necessarily will take me, but I know that I am on my way there.
After this conversation full of practical tips, here are my notes to self. Set expectations keeping in mind what is in your control. For the things that are out of your control, don't set expectations on those. Pay attention to what moves your soul. That probably aligns with your purpose. Also, pay attention to what doesn't. Stay away from that. Applies to situations, people, jobs, roles, etc. To discover what encompasses your identity, consider asking yourself questions like why and what values do you want to bring to the table? When asking yourself the why, stay away from victimhood. The purpose of the question is to not find yourself in that same situation again, not to feel like a victim all over. This stage of mind steals a lot of time that you will not get back. You want something? Pray about it, visualize it, manifest it. You have to believe it. Stop outsourcing approval because you will never find it. Comparison is the thief of joy. The more you focus on them, the less you will have for yourself. Mindset can make or break what your life is. The way you confront situations will determine a lot of the outcome. Feelings are fleeting, but they are also a constant decision. Choose to be joyful, happy, and fulfilled with the little moments. Don't wait to reach a certain status or acquire a title to permit yourself to be happy. Feel the fear and do it anyway. When taking decisions, listen to your intuition. Remember, this one doesn't scream at you. Perhaps ask yourself, how would you feel after? Is it a step closer to where you want to be? Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at throughhazelseyes.official and Spotify through Hazel's Eyes.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. Remember, we have a date every Tuesday, so grab the tea, coffee, or wine and make it your time. Perhaps also invite your girls. Trust me, they'll appreciate powerful conversations entre amigas. Ahora sí, me despido. Hasta la próxima.